Yeah, I'm calling this a Language of Healing live election edition.
Looks like we're on.
Well, we will be in a second here.
Mine says meeting is now streaming live.
I see that.
YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
All right, come on now, share.
Why does it say you can release your video order here?
Bob looks so serious.
Huh?
It's like landing on the moon or something.
Houston, we have a problem.
Okay, we are also on Facebook. If anybody wants to grab and share that. Paul, do you want this on MPE at all?
Yeah, if you want to put it on there, sure.
Okay. Arnita, I'm going to put it on yours.
All right.
Guys, bear with us. Almost there.
Almost there.
And come over here to nonpartisan. Share in a group. Nonpartisan evangelical group. Yeah, look at me looking all serious again. I guess I do get serious when I type, huh?
You do.
There you go.
You do.
All right. And I think we are everywhere we need to be right now. So welcome, everyone. Once again, that little bit of housekeeping right at the beginning. It's Language of Healing Live election edition, as we are exactly 1 week away from what we always hear every 4 years, the most important election of our lifetime. They always are, aren't they? But today we've got some questions we're gonna tackle and some things we're gonna discuss, and we're going to be led by my dear friend Paul Swearingen, the original nonpartisan evangelical. You can find him on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the usual places under nonpartisan evangelical. Am I right, Paul?
You are right.
Look at me. Look at me. And trust me, he is a worthy follow. So if you get a chance to check him out, I really highly encourage it. But at this point, I'm going to turn the rest of our time over to Paul.
Okay, and I'm assuming everybody knows you guys. Are you guests that need no introduction?
Could be. If they've been following these, they have. This is their first one, though. They may not have a clue. They may think I'm Arnita.
Well, and the book, for anybody who doesn't know, and as Bob said, a very worthy follow, and particularly with this thing coming up on November 3rd, the book is A Language of Healing for a Polarized Nation, Creating Safe Environments for Conversation About Race, Politics, Sexuality, and Religion. Just light topics. And we have the co-authors of that book with us. So Arnita Taylor, wave Arnita.
Hello.
And Bob Prater, otherwise known as Robert Prater on the book.
That's me on the book.
I know him as Bob. And Wayne Jacobson.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. Well, it's an honor to be here with you guys. And your book couldn't be more timely as we head down the stretch to the election here. And it's all about how do we have safe environments for conversation about politics when we are so polarized. And so as we're coming towards this election day, and a lot of people have already voted and a lot of things are going on, but when we're dealing with somebody that's coming from a different political perspective than us, a different window, if you will, whether it be right or left, what would you guys suggest as pitfalls to avoid for people that want to have good discourse with their friends out there? Who wants to start on that topic? Look at you guys all acquiescing to each other. Somebody jump out there.
All being nice. My first thought is everything. Avoid everything.
Just avoid the conversations altogether.
Oh my gosh. I was listening to a podcast today that a friend sent me. I was taking a walk, and the first thing out of the interviewer's mouth, it's kind of a name everybody would know, but not necessarily a polarizing figure. And what she said was, I'm against safe spaces. That's what she starts with. I'm like, really? You include more dangerous spaces? What? And I know what she means, because she's kind of from the conservative side of things. And it's, safe places is where you can't talk about anything important because somebody will get hurt. It's all that mocking stuff people do, instead of realizing that, no, actually having a conversation in an environment where people aren't being hurt intentionally, but neither are people not saying what needs to be said. And so right now, I think for the next week, this is almost an impossible conversation to have with just about anybody, unless they're not polarized themselves. People are already out there. To me, everything right now is bottom line, win or lose my guy. I can't say anything that might even be honest if it distracts from support for whatever. So I think if you're going to have these conversations, you just got to gauge how polarized the person is that you're wanting to talk to. How polarized are they? And you can find that out just by talking a bit, seeing if their anger rises to the surface quick. If there is, yeah, it's probably not a safe place to go. It can be what I do. I recognize when people are judging someone else's motives. I heard someone I'm having an exchange with today on Facebook, and it was like Governor Newsom's just using this, COVID thing to ruin Christianity in America, take churches out. And I'm saying, see, once you've judged somebody's motives, we really can't have a conversation after that, because if that is his motive, he hasn't said it. There's nothing going on that seems to say that's true. But once you've frozen yourself there, then the pitfall I look for is when you're that cemented in your opinion. I'm not going to invite you into this conversation. I'm not going to have it with you.
So the pitfall to avoid is knowing who to avoid having the conversation with.
Yes.
How about
anger and judgment at the top of my list for that.
Who wants to follow up that one?
Well, my answer to that question would be, you want to say as little as possible, as positively as possible. And that's my answer. As little as possible, as positively as possible. Again, I'm kind of like Wayne, I'm going to gauge it. I'm going to fill it out and kind of see. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say as little as possible, as positive as possible. I had a discussion with several people in our Language of Healing group who was like, I'm tired of hearing safe. I'm tired of coddling emotions. What does safe mean? Well, safe doesn't mean you won't get confronted and questioned on your position. And I've never meant to convey that means safe. And so a lot of people are like, no, if I got to hold it in and I can't say it because somebody's going to fall apart, then I'm not going there. And so that's not necessarily what we mean. But you do have to have enough emotional fortitude to be able to stay in a conversation without falling apart when someone challenges your space or position. But like Wayne said, you really got to gauge it in the moment and kind of fill it out and see if it's a good use of time. So.
Does some of that, Bob, come down to what your goal is in the relationship with the person, maybe?
Yeah, I would think if your goal is to know one another, I mean, in the sense of relationally knowing, then some of these things are going to come up because these are important issues of life. And the crazy thing to me is, we talk about pitfalls, and I jokingly said, here we are with the most important election of our lifetime again. But in this instance, there are way more pitfalls than there have been in previous presidential elections, I think. And that's because the country has moved in a direction, it's like somebody got knocked down in the middle of the ring and the ref stood there and said, go to your corners. And we're in corners apart from each other with this whole vast, common ground in between us, and nobody's willing to come out of their corners. For me, if you want to look at a pitfall, don't come in hard and fast and angry. Lead with a smile, and I like to ask questions like, so tell me why, because I want to have an understanding. And people like to be heard, and people will almost always, unless they're crazy, will almost always give a reason for what they believe. They like to talk about what they believe and why. So I think there's a way to do that is respectful, that doesn't jump to conclusions. I think one of the things that a lot of people do, and I mean a lot of people, is they're formulating what they're going to say while you're still talking. And they're just waiting for you to take a breath so that they can come in and say the brilliant thing they thought of, and they haven't heard the last 200 words that came out of your mouth. So we need to not do that. We need to stay engaged, stay focused, eye contact, empathy, all of those things. But I think there's an honorable way to disagree. Although, boy, it's really difficult in today's world.
What is the value of these discussions? I'm assuming you guys wrote this book to provide that mechanism for people to have the conversations. Why would anybody want to wade into a political conversation in this day and age? What is the value of having those conversations?
Well, Bob made us write it, so Bob, you answer that.
Bob's baby.
Yeah, I just took everybody's arms and put them right behind their backs and said, "You're writing this book."
Should we just avoid the conversations?
No,
altogether?
there's value. No, there is value. We can't just put our heads in the sand and try to talk around. I mean, when I was a kid, I was always told religion and politics are the two things that you don't bring up in polite company, because the company will turn impolite very quickly. And that, that's when I was a kid 50 some years ago. It's even worse today. But these conversations are probably more vital than at any time since I've been alive, because there's so much at stake. I think there's an ability to hold two thoughts at once. Arnita has been speaking a bit with us on the power of simultaneous, the power of having more than one thought at the same time. And my phone is going off. Hold on here. Stop that. Hold on. Stop.
Go in the
I
trash.
took a screenshot of it instead of turning it off. Sorry. So the power of simultaneous. So, I have been a Republican my entire life. I was a staunch conservative Republican most of that time. These days, I probably lean a little bit left, although I think I'm probably left center. I know I'm not all the way over. But for me, I've got to be able to say, okay, there's probably something there with Hunter Biden. There just is. I'm not going to I'm not going to just ignore it and hope it goes away, because there's probably something there. But oh my gosh, there's stuff on the other side too. So we can hold these things at the same time without, this blind defense of our position. We can admit that there are flaws, and there are good things on both sides. I mean, I like the way the president has dealt economically with some of our trading partners, and tried to make things a little bit more fair. I think that was necessary. It should have been done long ago. So I mean, there's good things that he's done, but boy, I could list some bad ones too.
Does that help to sort of give some to the other side when you're talking with somebody, or do they tend to jump on that?
What do you guys think?
I think the power of simultaneous is the point of that you could say, hey, there's some good over here, some bad over here. I think when anybody sees their own view as the only reasoned view, and everybody else is nuts, particularly looking across the aisle over there, that tells you they're already on one of the extremes. Because I don't think Republicans or Democrats have the market cornered on character or anti-corruption, or politics is a messy business, and I don't know many people who get far untainted by the necessity of putting down your enemies, mocking people who disagree with you, playing up to your rich buddy friends, pardoning people you like, and holding people to account that you don't like. I mean, all that's tainted. But if you can step back a little bit and say, okay, here's the positive things over here, I do think that helps open up the discussion. And another way to tell if the other person's willing to come in and meet you there. If Biden is just a communist that's going to lead our country into Russia, then they go, okay, well, that's a hard conversation to have. And if Trump is just an idiot who does everything wrong, well, then that's a tough discussion to have. But if you can step back a little bit, I think your original question was, is this worth it? Is there a reason to have these conversations? And my heart says, if we don't have a future as a country. The growing polarity is of grave concern. And our book wasn't written to change Washington. It was written to change people. So where that begins is not at MSNBC or Fox News or Washington, D.C. or New York. It happens in your home with the people you know, the conversations you're willing to engage. And are you going to fight for a common good, or do you just want what's best for you and your opponents in this country be damned? And if that's where you are, that's where people on the other side are as well. And there's no good end to that. There isn't.
Yeah, good stuff.
At the end of the day, the conversations are always about promoting understanding. I think people fail to realize Bob, Wayne, and I had conversations. We didn't agree on everything. We had conversations. You got to see into 15 different conversations. I just want people to go have one to promote understanding. So the conversations are necessary to promote understanding, period. You cannot understand what you judge from another side if you won't get in the room. And the problem that I have is all the people with all the mouth, I call it know-it-nones, are not in the arena having the conversation. They're just judging everybody who's having the conversation. So the goal is to have the conversations to promote understanding. You don't have to turn into that person. You do not have to adopt their value stream, but have the conversation for understanding. You don't have to do anything with that. But I think that's a real big person. I think that's a kingdom person. I think that's a mature perspective. And certainly, I don't want to preach today, but certainly a position that people who are Christ followers should be willing to adopt.
Preach it. And
say amen.
Amen.
Oh, and she brought up man in the arena a bit, which, if this were a game show, she would have gotten a lot of points for that, and she'd probably be ahead right now. So just FYI.
Absolutely. And for anybody that hasn't read the book, it's actually written as a conversation between the three of you. Very, very unique how you crafted it together. And so reading it in that way and seeing it as a conversation is really a fascinating way to look at this topic. And Bob, you mentioned empathy. What role does empathy play in this? How does empathy work into having good discussions on polarizing topics?
Coming back to my own political biases, which I do have, I have them for days. It's important for me to remember that there are legitimate reasons that people disagree with me. As a matter of fact, I like to say that most people that have personal issues with me come by those things honestly. Oftentimes it's something I did. So that ability to understand that I am not the standard of intelligence on the earth. I'm just one more voice. And I do have ideas, and I do have thoughts, and I have opinions and all that. But at the end of the day, that's all they are. And so someone else has thoughts, ideas, and opinions as well. And respect demands that I treat those with value, because if I don't treat someone's opinions as valuable, then what I'm literally saying is that person is not valuable. So I've got to be able to place myself into those with whom I disagree with. I've got to be able to place myself in their shoes and ask, why is it that they feel like they feel? And in some cases, it's, it might be religious indoctrination. It might be fear that it might be, I don't want to pay more taxes. It's a myriad of things, but it's never just one. It's never just one thing.
How about empathy, Wayne, Arnita? You guys want to jump in on that?
I take what Arnita just said about listen enough to understand. There's a group we've gotten in touch with through the writing of this book called Preemptive Love, whose mission in the world is to end war. Now, that's a heck of a mission statement. We're out to end war, and their kind of credo goes, listen to someone enough to understand, and understand enough to have empathy. So there's really kind of a continuum there, really understanding them. And then if you really understand somebody, empathy is the fruit of it. It really is. And so you don't just intellectually understand. I used to do a thing with the University of Laverne, their education management program. They would bring in educators, board members, doctoral students. And one of the sessions they did when they were in town was to assign everybody an interest group, but you were assigned an interest group opposite of your own. So if you're a conservative Christian, you're put in the liberal group. If you're a man, you're put in the women's issues group. If you're, if you're a gay activist, you're put in the conservative Christian group. And then they had trainers train those people. There'd be like 6 or 7 in each group. And they were trained to think like a religious conservative, trained to think like a militant feminist, trained to think like a gay activist. And they were all trained with that in mind. And it always was the opposite of what they would normally lean into. And then for the next week and a half, they had to negotiate issues as if they were on a school board representing the group, and they got graded by how well they represented the group. And just seeing so many people after the training sessions, I did religious conservatives a lot. I would get people come up to me and just say, I had no idea how much this makes sense to them. They still disagree. They didn't buy into the view, but they're going, okay, now I understand why they think the way they do. It used to be, I just thought they were stupid. I thought they were naive. I just thought they were easily led by their, religious leaders to think whatever they think. And the same thing happened to religious conservatives who had represent a gay point of view or a liberal point of view. And by the end of the negotiating sessions, the feedback we always got from the people around the program was, people end up just absolutely transformed. Again, their opinions didn't change. At the end of the day, I learned about them, so I agreed with them. No, but I understood where they were coming from, and and having empathy with that position helped them learn how to talk to them in a different way. And that's the value, I hope.
I think empathy is the one quality that allows you to change context. You can contextually put yourself in the place of another person. We say lace up my boots, but empathy is the quality that you need to change your context enough to understand. I really believe that. All of our conversations have context. All of our experiences and things that have shaped us have context. And so it's important to understand that that's always there when we're talking and trying to understand other people. It just shifts context when you can have empathy. So.
And can I press you for a little more, like logistically, what does that look like? How do you change your context in a conversation with someone?
Because literally, I kind of like Wayne said, I'm going to put myself literally in the story you're telling me. I'm going to put myself in the middle of it. I'm going to take myself out over here, and I'm going to put myself over here. Now, I'll be honest. Initially, most people, your paradigms are so tight, most of the time it's going to be hard, but something is going to be shaken in you when you get from over here to over here. And I think it takes sometimes that drastic of a position. It's kind of human nature not to do that, to resist doing that, because we're so individualistic in society. But when I have to come over here and figure out when I have to go live among homeless people for a month, I'm going to have a whole different perspective because my context changed. It changed. My empathy level is going to change. So I think it's just really important to think about it that way. Maybe if you're not able to literally do it.
Yeah, and I think part of this is words we hear a lot today is deceived. I think, Wayne, you were leading this like, oh, you're just led by, either we're thinking people are deceived or evil or stupid. And so I guess we kind of have to, Wayne, drop kind of some of those presuppositions about people.
You have to be willing enough to get to know why they think what they think and care about it. And if you don't have that, like in the Black Lives Matter movement from the spring coming into it, I can tell by talking to somebody not very long, like, people that look like me, and how they talk about this issue. I can tell you whether or not they have a Black friend or not with whom they've talked about these things. Or conversely, whether they have a police person in their life who's a cop that they know and know what they go through. And so you're able to hold kind of both in mind and not just jump on one side against the other, but say this is a heavily nuanced conversation. And if we have friends among various groups of people, we'll have a greater shot at empathy across the line, saying, yeah, I see there's a problem with cops that get out of hand. That's a problem. And, cops always protecting each other is part of that problem. There's got to be an honesty about it. At the same time, just to be dismissed, say, these people weren't cooperating, they deserve to be shot by the police. That's not helpful. You don't know a mom then who has sent her kid out in the world, not even sure if he has an altercation with the police that he's coming home tonight. And I don't have that thought for my boy. I never had that thought. So when you know people who do have that thought, now you're in the discussion at a better level. And that's hopefully what we can encourage people to do. Get to know somebody that's polar opposite of you and care about them. Doesn't mean you agree. Jesus didn't ask us to agree with everyone. He just asked us to love each other. And love doesn't require agreement.
And Bob, maybe that takes some of that Christian 2 Chronicles 7:14 humbling of ourselves, huh?
Well, it does. I mean, that's where this has to begin. I mean, when I say I'm not the standard of all intelligence, that is in effect saying I'm not the standard of all intelligence. I'm somewhere far, far, far below that. It's recognizing that we don't know everything. It's recognizing that we don't walk this earth with all truth. And it's recognizing that the proper posture in a season like we find ourselves in is to maybe put our head down a bit and admit that we're in over our heads as people, as a culture. We're just in over our heads. I still think there are solutions. My goodness, the three of us wrote a book about it. So I do believe that there are solutions, but we're so deep in right now that those solutions are not easy anymore. And not that they ever are or ever were, but it's way more difficult to do this now than it would have been to do this, in the 1980s or 1990s. It's just the world is different.
Glad for everybody joining us out there. The book is A Language of Healing for a Polarized Nation. And Arnita, Bob, and Wayne, the co-authors, are with us here. We have holidays coming up after the election, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Of course, Dr. Fauci is encouraging us not to get together for Thanksgiving, but maybe some families aren't going to get together for Thanksgiving for other reasons because they just can't have those table conversations anymore. Have you guys experienced loss of relationship in this? And does anybody want to share a story about losing relationship over politics?
I have. And I've lost, a couple that I can think of off the top of my head where things got so toxic that for my own well-being, I had to step back. But then there's also been some where there's such a level of misunderstanding and such a level of suspicion of one another that I've had friends where we've been friends for 20 plus years that when I don't toe that party line, the reality becomes they pull away. And as I've been in a certain stream of the church since I was a kid, and along with seeing things through a slightly different lens, a lot of those relationships are strained. They just are. I can't even tell you the last time I got invited to speak somewhere, and I used to speak a lot at different places. So there's when you begin to look through a different lens than all the other people in your life, it's a breeding ground for suspicion. And they look at me like, what are you up to? And what are people like you planning? And somehow I'm going to circumvent the truth, or I'm going to circumvent whatever. But man, I've had really dear relationships take they've taken some shots over where we are.
Yeah. Wayne, what does that Thanksgiving table look like for people? How do we does family make this all the more difficult?
It can. I think every family dynamic is a little bit different, right? Sometimes the adage, don't discuss religion and politics with close friends or family, really is important not to do if you're going to ruin Thanksgiving. I've never found that to be true. My family has disagreements over lots of things. We've never made agreement essential as a nuclear family within my own kids and framework. You get wider than that. Yeah, I've lost some friends like Bob, and I lose them not because we disagree. I lose them because if you can't agree with me, I don't like you anymore. That's where it comes from. It comes from another side, and I've never done that. If somebody, I was with someone recently, and we're talking about this election coming up, and they're really pro-Trumpers by far, and I'm not, and we got talking a little bit about that. And at the end, he looked at me and says, "Okay, we will not talk again until after the election." And I said, "Au contraire, we'll talk again." I said, "We don't have to talk about this. I'm not interested in convincing you." He said, "I can't imagine anybody voting for higher taxes." I said, "Well, I'm not voting for higher taxes. I'm voting because I have a concern about other things in the world than just that." And so I did. I sought him out this week. We got together again, spent some time, and we even bumped around the Trump Biden thing a little bit and kind of playfully got some laughs. But I don't let people leave me on that unless they've decided to despise me because I don't agree with them. Then that's their choice. There's nothing I can do about it. But I'm going to generally, particularly when a real disagreement comes out, I'm going to prove to you, that's how obstinate I'm going to prove to you my friendship is bigger than that. But not everybody lets you. Not everybody wants it to be bigger than that. And so when that happens, yeah, you're kind of stuck.
I got to tell you,
Go ahead, Bob.
I found myself putting way more effort into relationships than the people I was having relationships with, because as they pull back, Wayne, I'm like you. I step towards them until they just don't want me to take any more steps. And by the time, something goes another way, it's a completely unbalanced, one-sided friendship anyway, because they've lost interest for whatever reason. Arnita, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just thinking about the cancel culture that we live in. And everybody talks about the cancel culture with the young people and, how they do it with celebrities and stuff. Christians cancel people quicker than anybody. It just cracks me up. You talk about cancel culture. You come against one thought and you are out. You are out, Bob. You will never speak again in a church as long as you live.
But I like Disneyland and Teletubbies. What's wrong? Bob, I'm gonna have to cancel our relationship after this.
It's not that. Just even talk about the semantics of saying concert protest or worship protest. And boy, that got such a reaction. Like, oh my gosh, you're treading on sacred cows or something, which I don't mind doing. I've never minded treading on sacred cows. But yeah, people get their defenses up pretty quick, and they tend to draw that little club that says, "Oh, we all believe in this together, so we're okay, and we don't have to deal with the wider world." And yeah, it's a problem. I think I've lost more followers and book readers and things like that because of my friendship with Arnita than anything else.
Isn't that
wow, Arnita?
That's
people have found that very threatening. Yeah.
It's so sad. It's so sad. It's so real. But it's so very sad. If people could think about what he just said, that's so very sad. Where are we as humanity when Wayne aligning with one Black woman on the planet who really wanted to be Papa in a movie?
And didn't get to be.
Let it down and I didn't get to. And all of a sudden he's having backlash from having conversations with me. That's just, it sounds so ridiculous. It's just because it is.
It's some of that in Christianity. I ran into this week where somebody was saying, when I was kind of saying, is there a chance we could think about this a different way? And the guy was like, well, that's what Satan said to Eve in the garden. There is this fear in Christianity of being deceived or taken in some direction that causes us to have that problem.
Yeah. But what depravity we have when a white man's relationship with a Black woman, what depravity? What is that saying? What are we saying, people? What are we saying, humanity? When you make him pay for having a relationship with me, that is sad and pitiful. That's all I'm gonna say.
But I'm willing to pay it. I'm willing to pay it. It's okay with me. I wouldn't trade this friendship for anything. And there's other people in my life besides Arnita who come from this side of whatever in our culture. And I've got a friend who's an illegal immigrant, and love him to death, love his family to death. And just because, but then that has shaped how I feel about immigration and some of the answers we need to have for it that we're not getting to as a culture. And that ticks off some other people that I used to be on that side of it because I didn't know anybody. So you can always stick to your principles when you don't know people that are affected by how your principles don't apply well across the board. So I treasure those relationships. And if I remember one time, this was a friend of mine was on staff at Oral Roberts University, and then somehow got backstabbed by something politically that went on behind the scenes at the university. And he's at a communion service and Oral Roberts walks in. And he's just really upset that Oral's walked into the room. And he's just like, oh God, you guys, because that's the guy that kind of didn't follow through on something he's supposed to follow through on. And he felt like God said to him, listen, if you need me to hate Oral Roberts to love you, it's not going to happen. That's something God would say. If I have to hate somebody else for you to be, it just doesn't work that way. God loves us all, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get along with each other. And that's got to go across everything, racially, politically, sexually, spiritually. We've got to look beyond that. And again, agreement is not required to love somebody. You don't have to agree, but can you disagree, and still have respect for a person and why they believe what they believe? And to me, that's just so simple, but for other people, that's pretty complex. They can't seem to wrap their heart around it.
Well, Wayne brought up the topic a little bit ago. The importance of these conversations is, can we survive as a country, as a people together, if we're not willing to have those conversations? Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So what are some practical steps we can take after November 3rd to try to bridge some of those gaps so that democracy and maybe America itself can survive? Do you guys have any thoughts about, and are you going to take some of those steps or try to take some of those steps after November 3rd?
I'll jump in. Courage. And courage shows itself in this case in creating our own proximity with others who don't think in lockstep with us or don't look like us. Wayne talked about the price that he has paid for for friendship with Arnita.
Oh, I mean, really, I'm fabulous.
I mean, but you know what? This is how this stuff works. And so, when we were talking earlier about, is it important to have these discussions? When I'm with someone that is just absolutely set in what they believe and what they think, I look at it as I have become their proximity. I'm the guy that can maybe speak to some things for them if I have that kind of relationship, and they might listen. Just the way my life was changed by Arnita, just the way my life was changed by Ahmad Mirza, and so many people that don't look like me have had input into me becoming the person that I eventually became. Now, some people might say, I don't want to be like you, Bob, so I'm just going to choose to stay in your bubble, and you will be guaranteed to not be like me. Go ahead and just stay in the bubble. Be around those who agree with everything that you think and say. But there's another world out there, and it's a world. My goodness, John 3:17 says, "For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." And so there's a whole world out there, guys, just waiting for us to have a little bit of courage, step over the line, and begin to enter into relationship.
Well, I'm not talking to anybody for 3 days after the election. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm gonna shove a phone off. I'm going to protect myself against myself, because you are challenged by God to guard your own heart. And so you need to be able to provide self-care for yourself, no matter how the election turns out. But the thing that I would say, if someone by chance on November 7th, when I turn everything back on, wants to have a conversation, I would have to ask myself, why am I having the conversation? Why am I even having the conversation? Is this a necessary conversation? Because, if somebody just wants to gloat or mock or, oh, come on, it's really not the time for that. Now, do I have the skill to shut that down? Yes. But really and truly, I think right after that, it's a fair question to ask yourself, why are you going to engage in those conversations so soon? Why? Why? Why is it necessary? Do you want to? You don't have to. Now, I'm probably going to call Wayne and Bob, but other than that, I'm probably not going to talk to a lot of people.
Oh, I probably am. Probably because I'm a bit of a masochist. I don't mind mixing it up. I've got questions for people on either side of this thing, no matter who wins. I don't think we're going to know by November 7th who wins, quite honestly. Yeah. I think it's going to be a long time, and there's going to have to be some groundwork done even through that process. I've got questions for people. If Trump wins again, my questions for his supporters, even this friend of mine, is going to be, so what are you going to do now to help reach across to those who feel like their earth was just shattered? And I'd ask the same of Biden supporters if he wins. What are you going to say to reassure your fellow countrymen? Because I think Abraham Lincoln's statement is one, prophetic. A house divided itself cannot stand. I will not be surprised if after this election, certain groups take weapons into the streets, either as a show of force or actually to use them. I think there'll be people die after the election is decided. And I think that's all incredibly tragic. So any of us that can talk it down with people that we know can help talk it down. Just have some empathy for the other side. Winners, the old idea, winners are gracious. Now, we haven't seen that in a while, because winners are, not only did I win, but now I'm going to stomp it in your face. We see it every Sunday after a football game. Somebody scores a touchdown. They've got to, it's not just I did well, it's in your face. It's all this aggression that's in our society. Yeah, and if we don't fix it, if we don't talk about it, if we don't dial it back, if we don't get some handle on it going into the next election, which people will start announcing next month, who's going to run for it in 2024, it's a tough road to hoe. But we really need that to come from the top. Common ground is something that's bigger than just conversations. Conversations are toward understanding, empathy, that kind of thing. To get to common ground, we're going to need a transcendent leader to be bigger than their own agenda. And I think we've had that in times past. We've had executives, presidents who've, after an election, invited people into, I'm going to be the president of all the people, at least gave lip service to the idea that we want to bring a nation back together after an election. We really need it not to just be about the election. We've got to bring America back together, and that's going to be somehow challenging the media silos by which we process information. The fact that we don't have the same set of facts anymore. We don't even know what facts are, because people lie like crazy on both sides of this thing, and they shape every incident to their own agenda. Hopefully new media emerges. Somebody's really interested in cultivating the common ground. But I don't know. I don't know if our country's big enough for that. This could well be the beginning of the end for our republic. It could be.
And I've been sort of half jokingly saying I'm going to paint some lamb's blood on the doorpost of our house after this, perhaps. But I don't know, Bob.
PETA will be after you, bud.
No, that's true.
I wouldn't say it in public, man.
How dare you?
That's true. Bob, are you concerned about the well-being of the nation after this election?
I think anybody with any kind of a pulse is concerned. There are groups on both sides that are mobilizing. I just saw that BuzzFeed released an expose on a white supremacist group. They got access to their phone calls and texts and all kinds of stuff. So there's things being planned there, but then there's also a new group. I can't remember what they're called, but it's a group of very angry people. It has the F word in their title. It's like not effing gonna take it anymore, and whatever those initials are. And they are beginning to hold rallies and meet together. So it's, I come back to that thing of like a boxing match or a wrestling mat, where we're in these separate corners, and all the space in between is common ground, all of it. All we have to do is just take one step, and we're in a place we haven't been, because we're literally living in the corners. I mean, how crazy is that we have chosen to live boxed in when there's a whole world, there's a whole lot of thought out there and a whole lot of wonder and we choose to live in a corner.
What you guys are saying, Al Gore comes to mind, and I know Al's not always a popular guy with all sides, but after the 2000 election was decided by the Supreme Court, I think Al Gore did that healing for us in that he thought the election had been stolen, yet he still stepped up and said, for the good of the country, congratulations, President Bush, and I'm behind you all the way. And as individuals, how can we be a part of that? Do we display that ourselves and encourage others to move from my good and what's good for me to what is our good? How do we do that?
No, Paul, I really think that comes with a very intentional decision. We talk about intentional compassion in the book, but this is probably an extension of being intentionally compassionate. Do you want to be a person who is building alliances, collaboration, and bridges? Or do you want to be a person who is putting up constraints and barriers and walls? Where do you want to be? That really is binary. Which person do you want to show up as? Because in every interaction, every place you go, you can choose to do that, but you have to purpose. And you have to have that motivation to be able to do it. Are you going to be a bridge or a wall? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And all of us have the power to do that. And you change the culture of your city, your family, your town, your nation, your state, your country, one person at a time. If that attitude could permeate, we could get some change, probably some transformative change, if we would just all purpose to do that. Now, will we all do that? No, it's still up to personal decision. But I think going forward, you will have to decide, where do I want to play here? Do I want to be a bridge? Do I want to be a wall? What do I want to do? And it's still personal to me.
And I hope people really heard that, because there are people that I know that really feel like the virtuous choice in that is to raise the wall of God's standards for the country. And they see a wall as a virtue. And that's somehow has to be addressed, because it really is bridging, particularly those that are going to hold up a standard for righteousness. In their view of what that is, Jesus was about building bridges to the lost. Paul was about all things to all people, that I may gain some. The whole heritage of the gospel we come from is about building bridges. Yes, but in the fear of feeling, and this is predominant among, I think you're the nonpartisan evangelical, Paul, but I hear all the time the fear that religious views have never been more persecuted in America than they are right now. Christianity is under persecution. They're coming to take away our services. They're coming to take away everything we value. I am surprised at the number of rational friends that I know for which that conclusion shapes their view. And so they want to build a wall. They want the government to build a wall that defends their point of view against their neighbor's point of view and see it as a virtue. So I hope they heard what Arnita said, because to me, the value is not building walls, leaving people out. It's building bridges so that the love of Christ can communicate from our hearts into people who disagree with us, who see the world differently. We're not making Christianity very engaging at this point, when it becomes the wall builder par excellence of the world and thinks it's doing a great job and treats everybody else with such condescension.
Right.
Because we're the best. We know everything that needs to be known. You just need to do it our way. And if you're not willing to, then we're going to build walls to contain you. That is a predominant point of view among conservatives, unfortunately. Not all, but many.
Well,
sorry for my dog joining the broadcast.
I think it'll be okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
So Wayne, what you said is wonderful, but in practice, that doesn't help us conquer the people who are wrong. It doesn't help us conquer those who are destroying whatever, and it doesn't help us build power. It basically goes in the opposite direction. It gives power away. And so I think as long as we're in the business of building earthly kingdoms and conquering others, and really That's what this is about. We're not interested in just somebody saying that, I'm right and you're wrong. We want you to be subservient to us. We want you to be underneath us. And much of what's happening even in the church today, with all the declarations of, those bad people are doing these bad things to us, and it's all because of, we're afraid of losing power and influence.
And I don't think they would say they really want to conquer, or they want to. I think what they're saying, we want you to be like us. We have all the truth you need, and if you'll become like us, I mean, that's the one thing with the Christian crowd. You can tick them off any way you want to, but as soon as you confess and repent and join the club, they're out. You're in, man. Yeah, we're buddies now. And I think that's the larger problem, because it is about power. The evangelical crowd has decided political power is worth trading everything for.
It is.
And I don't see how these evangelical leaders in the long haul are not, whether Trump wins or loses this election or is out in 4 years, they're going to wear his character around their neck for the rest of their lives. How do you ever speak out with a moral point of view about character when you've been in the bucket for the things Trump has done, and you've tried to justify the things Trump has done? I mean, I'm all for people who vote for Trump because they think he has better policies. But those who think he's just God's man to save the church, I think they are deluded, incredibly deluded. And they'll wear that, because I know people who are in the back pocket of Trump for which they'll never be able to speak to me about moral issues in the future. Because the time when push came to shove, was character important? They decided it was less important than what you just talked about, which was power. They'd rather have power than character.
Well, the crazy thing here, guys, is that President Trump and the evangelical church have kind of created this narrative that he is the defender of Christianity, and without him, the church is in trouble. Without President Trump, the church is in trouble, and we need him, or else we're going to be in real trouble. When the reality is, he needs us. He needs this base so bad right now. And so it's the absolute opposite that's the truth. But we become so blind that there are none so blind as those who will not see. They just won't see.
Isn't it interesting? I always come at John 11, the Pharisees are like, hey, if people keep believing in Jesus, they're going to take our religion and take our country. And that was their basis. Even the Sadducees would say, hey, King Herod's he's a total jerk, but we need him to protect the Jewish faith. So it's almost like we're repeating history here again, thinking we've got to come up with some political means to save Christianity and save God, if you will, I guess. And so some of that, I think, has to be a part of our thought process. Arnita, you're going to speak.
No, I tell you, I just think that some of what you're saying just really represents simplistic thinking. And that just, that's just such a simple way of thinking, that if somebody's not in a political office, the world is going to fall. No, Jesus is Jesus. God is God. We're going to keep moving. But to not be able to think outside of that is alarming to me. It's alarming to me as a pastor. It's alarming to me as a believer. It's just alarming to me that all of that has gotten so overlapped and intersected, particularly for new believers. It's just disheartening to me as a Christian, a person who seeks truth and who knows truth, to think that everything crumbles on an election. It ain't crumbled before. It's not going to crumble now. But, just some of the ways that we think in little boxes, that we don't allow ourselves to think. There's forces and power bigger than political offices. And so that's just my 2 cents there. It's almost blasphemous to me to hear that an election is going to tank the world. I'm not. That's just Arnita. That ain't Bob and Wayne, though. I mean, I'm speaking for me, so don't hold it against my co-authors. So.
Yeah, and yet those people are the ones that still need to be invited into this common ground.
Yeah.
People need to. So I'll be interested to see how we get beyond this election, and regardless of what happens, how people who are brothers and sisters in the faith, how you're going to find your way back to a more generous way of living in the culture, because we need them. It's easy to dismiss them. I don't want to. It's a lot of my friends and family I care about deeply, but I hope through some of what happens, they can grow a bit and realize, my gosh, we need to be open to something wider than just what serves us well. And I don't know how that happens apart from them being confronted with it. You look at the Old Testament minor prophets, it was always about oppressing the poor and gaining power. And that's what God was always ragging on his people about. It's very easy for us to get lost in what we think is true. And then we get to put that on everybody else. And yet those are the people who, as we've talked about it, there's some persecution from that crowd coming to the rest, and yet they feel like they're the most persecuted crowd. That's the hard conversation to have. How do you help a group that feels persecuted to see that you might be part of the persecuting? You might be for other groups. And it's a challenge. God's got to be bigger than us at doing this. I'm glad I get to do this one conversation at a time. I'm not on a national platform that's telling other people what they need to do about this. It just comes down to me and my friends and family and how I relate to them and what I say in the public channels I have a voice in.
So
I think-
hope becomes super important. We do not abandon hope. We do not give up hope. I love the kind of strict biblical definition of hope, which means confident expectation. We confidently expect things to get better. We just do, because we know how things work. And if we have hope, then we can step into that and literally begin to see. And no matter how polarized, it's an opportunity for people to speak a language of healing with one another. There's never been a greater opportunity for people to speak a different language than probably right now in the history, maybe of this planet, that we have an opportunity to affect change simply by the language that we speak. Pretty big deal.
And I think it's, one of the favorite verses of people in the Bible is Jeremiah 29:11, that God says, I want to prosper you and not harm you. I want to give you a hope and a future. And I keep reminding people that verse came in a season quite a bit like today, when culture was melting down and things were going in the wrong direction. So there is still hope. So the book is a language of healing for a polarized nation, creating safe environments for conversations about race, politics, sexuality, and religion. I highly recommend it. It is good reading anytime, but perhaps this week, as important as any time in recent history that I can remember. So Arnita, Bob, and Wayne, thanks for letting me be a part of this. This was great and fun and important.
Thanks for reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yep.
Awesome. What do we do now, Bob? This is your show, bud.